What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show. I am your host, EJ Holland. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. We're consistently dropping lives and new videos, so you're going to want to subscribe, get an alert every time we drop a new video, and liking this video obviously helps more Michigan fans get here, get in the chat, participate. It's always fun when we have more questions and more engagement, and you guys can interact with each other in the chat box. And last promo to start things off before we get into all your questions tonight. If you're not a subscriber to thewolverine.com, make sure to subscribe today. So yesterday I put in an on-3 recruiting prediction for Maxwell Roy. The other sites came in today. You can get all your news first over at the Wolverine that you can't find here on the YouTube channel. So head over to thewolverine.com, subscribe today using the promo code UM1, $1 for 2 months at thewolverine.com. Get your premium insider recruiting information, team information, basketball transfer portal, NIL, and so much more. Plus, we have a huge community, like 10,000 members at this point. I'm not quite sure, but the message board over at the Ford is huge. So come interact, come get inside information, and just spend $1. Like, you can't even, I don't even think McDonald's has a dollar menu anymore. So this is best value you can get. All right, let's get into the questions and start off with Tyson Smith. And he says, are we getting Roy? So like I said at the top, Michigan is trending well with Maxwell Roy, and I did put in an on-3 prediction for Roy, who is a 4-star defensive lineman out of St. Joseph's Prep in Philadelphia. Michigan, a 95.5% favorite on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine after I put in my pick. Feeling really good about that pick. You know, I was kind of asked to keep it a little low key before I put in the prediction, but he actually made an unofficial visit to Michigan yesterday, and things went extremely well. He had great conversations with the entire Michigan staff, specifically defensive line coach Lou Esposito, who has done a phenomenal job since taking over. Man, you're talking about a guy that's doing a remarkable job on the recruiting trail, considering the fact that Michigan lost Mike Elston. They replaced him with Greg Scruggs, who was then let go after the whole DUI situation. And now you bring in Lou Esposito, who doesn't have a lot of experience recruiting at the Power 5 level or Power 4 level now. I don't think he had any experience recruiting at the Power 4 level. And that means he, didn't have many connections to the recruits already in the class. And he's having to play from behind since he was such a late spring hire. So, all of those factors working against Esposito. And he's like, you know what, I got this. He took Nate Marshall away from Miami already, landed a commitment from him. Now has Michigan in a great position for Maxwell Roy. He just locked in 4-star edge Jaylen Williams for an OV, top 100 edge Maran Dy for an OV. Michigan's in a good spot for Marco Jones coming out of his official visit, who's another on 300 edge. But yeah, no, I mean, I feel like Michigan is going to land Maxwell Roy. Ohio State is supposed to get an official visit this weekend, but I'm not sure that will actually happen. Rutgers and Wisconsin have been the other two schools that have been constant in this recruitment. But I think Michigan knocked it out of the park on the unofficial visit. If they don't get him, in the next week or so, then I think the Wolverines can seal the deal when he comes back for his official visit for Victor's Weekend on June 21st. So yes, I think Michigan is in a prime spot to close with Maxwell Roy, and I really, really like him as a prospect. I actually got a chance. You see his ranking right here. On3 has him as a 3-star, but the other sites all have him as a top 250 prospect, which is probably where I'd have him. I'd have him maybe in that 175 to 225 range. He's listed at 6'3", 290. He's actually, dropped some weight and kind of rebuilt his frame, but I've likened him to a heavier Chris Jenkins. Remember when Chris Jenkins was in high school, he was on the lighter side. He was like at 230, 240, and then ballooned up. Maxwell Roy's kind of already at 290. But yeah, similar type of athleticism. He's one of the countries, not just, Pennsylvania's, but one of the countries best wrestlers. He's a high school All-American on the mat, which is always great for defensive linemen. And I saw him last year against IMG Academy, and he was fantastic against an offensive line full of D1 players. So if Michigan is able to seal the deal, which again, I think they will, it would be another great piece to the defensive line. So the next question is also from Tyson Smith. He says, are we getting Williams? So obviously talking about Jaylen Williams, who I just mentioned, 4-star edge out of Chicagoland, coming in for an official visit. Jaylen's recruitment has been fun. I've had my prediction in since November, so I know there were predictions elsewhere for Jaylen, but I've had it in for a long time. Look, Jaylen's always wanted to go to Michigan. I will tell you that he was very close to committing to Michigan in January, but then you had all the staff movement. You know, Jim Harbaugh took Mike Elston with him to the NFL, and then Greg Scruggs was his replacement. And like I said, Michigan parted ways after that whole situation. And so Lou Esposito had to play from behind here, but Esposito's done a fantastic job of building a relationship with Williams. He locked in the official visit with him, last night going into this morning when they finalized the details. So, I feel like Michigan is back in the pole position, back in the driver's seat in this recruitment. I mean, he's a great culture fit. I'm excited for Michigan fans to kind of get to know him throughout the process because he has such a great magnetic personality. He just kind of screams Michigan kid. And on top of that, I think he's really underrated. You know, the services are kind of divided on him. On3 and ESPN have him ranked as a 3-star. 24/7 and Rivals have him ranked as a top 200 player. And I would side on that end. I do think he's a top 200 type player. When I saw him in game in the fall, he was fantastic. I saw him and Nate Marshall in the same swing through Chicagoland. And I thought Jaylen Williams was the better prospect, even though Nate Marshall is a top 100 guy by most services. So, I'm a big fan of Jaylen Williams. He checked so many boxes for me as a player, as a culture fit. I think, Nebraska's in this, but overall Michigan is in a great spot going into the official visit. It wouldn't be surprising to see the Wolverines close soon after. Next question, are we getting Dy? So like I said, Michigan getting top 100 edge Maran Dy in for an official visit. This was an interesting one. Michigan looked dead in the water in this recruitment as Dy had no official set to Michigan, didn't even mention Michigan as a contender in his recent interview with Steve Wiltfong. Out of nowhere, here comes Lou Esposito, who's suddenly turned into a beast on the recruiting trail and has Michigan right back in it. Now, Ohio State is the heavy leader on the On3 recruiting prediction machine, and just because Michigan is back in the mix doesn't mean they have a lot of work to do. They do, but I think they can take a step forward this weekend. Obviously, there's a lot to pitch, in terms of the edge production, development, getting guys to the NFL. Easy to point to Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo and guys like that. Ohio State does have the advantage when it comes to NIL, which I'm a little concerned will be a factor in this recruitment, but Michigan's come back from the dead, and I think Dy is now leaning towards staying closer to home. So Georgia was a factor, Tennessee was a factor, but I'm not really sure if those two schools are going to move the needle. I really do think proximity will play a big role. And so I think this might actually come down to Ohio State and Michigan, which is a little crazy to think about considering Michigan wasn't even in, the top 6 at this point a few days ago. So I'm not sure if Michigan will land Dy, but they have certainly improved their chances there. Tyson Smith says, what are we getting for dinner? I don't know what you're getting for dinner. For me, I'm making shepherd's pie, which is a very underrated dish. Hit me up for a recipe. Ben Ricketts says, what would be the most realistic expectation on the number of commits for June? Could we see one more this week? I think when Zach and I did this show before official visits, we said 8 was kind of a realistic number for, June into maybe mid-July. Because, a lot of kids, they give silent commitments on these June OVs, and then they don't make things public until July. So, I would say 8 is pretty realistic. Could be even more than that if they just knock it out of the park on official visits. I think Maxwell Roy is a possibility to pull the trigger soon. Jaylen Williams is a possibility to pull the trigger soon. Kainoa Winston, I'm not sure if he makes it through all of his official visits. I really think it's going to come down to Michigan and Penn State, which is hosting him for an OV this weekend. And I think he could decide soon after that. He was pretty honest with me and told me that he could, make the call at any point and that it would be sometime this month. So those are a few guys that come to mind. So that would be my answer for that. Ben Ricketts back with another one, and he says, what are your thoughts on Shamari Earls? Do you think Michigan could flip him from South Carolina? So everybody here should know that I love Shamari Earls, top 100 cornerback out of my current home state of Virginia. I've had a chance to go out and see him live. I think he's a 5-star talent. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, moves extremely well for his size, runs in the 10.6s in the 100 meter. And if you're 6'2", 200 running a 10.6, you're a freak of an athlete, which Shamari Earls definitely is. Now, committed to South Carolina, but still considering other schools like Georgia, Michigan, Virginia is getting an official visit. I think with Michigan, we won't really know until they get him on campus for a visit. But Lamar Morgan, Michigan's new secondary coach, has definitely put the Wolverines in a position to be a contender in this recruitment. Ben Ricketts back with another one. He says, any flip targets or guys to watch this summer that are committed elsewhere? So if you aren't a subscriber to our YouTube channel, I did a video on 5 flip targets, which you can definitely go out and watch. But, there are definitely a handful to keep an eye on. We just talked about Shamari Earls. This week, Michigan actually had Maryland commit Julian Horton on campus. He's a 3-star safety out of Maryland. And yes, committed to Maryland. So he decided to kind of stay closer to home and has been flying under the radar. But Michigan brought him in for an unofficial visit, and I think they really moved the needle there. I talked to him yesterday and had a story up at the over on the Wolverine.com, and I think Michigan could be a flip candidate there for sure. Alex Graham is committed to Colorado. He's a Michigan legacy. They could potentially circle back with him as well. So, not necessarily a flip guy as far as a guy committed to another school, but former Notre Dame wide receiver commit Sean Terry just scheduled an official visit with Michigan. So he's one to watch. But yeah, I did a video on it if you guys want to go and check that out. Ava Dedivanaj says, how do you feel about the Andrew Babalola crystal ball to Stanford? So yeah, 5-star offensive lineman. Andrew Babalola has been predicted to Stanford by our national recruiting analyst, Steve Wiltfong. And I can totally see that. I think Stanford's been a major player here for quite some time. The academics are second to none. And even though Michigan also offers an elite education, I think some guys just really like that. Sorry, I got a couple of texts from a source while I was doing this. Good news coming Michigan's way. But yeah, I think, some kids just fit that Stanford mold. They really value that, Ivy League type of education. And I think Babalola is an anomaly in the NIL era and just wants to go to Stanford. Some kids are just built that way. So, it'll be interesting to see if he does end up making it to Michigan for his scheduled OV, but not super optimistic there. John A. Schultz, yeah, I am sorry that your questions disappeared. If you get in here too early, for some reason, YouTube still hasn't fixed that bug. But glad you're back and are asking your questions. EJ, who is your Maxwell Roy comp? I've seen a lot of people make the Chris Jenkins comparisons. Well, you have the same versatility Jenkins had on the defensive line. Anybody who's making the Chris Jenkins comparison, that was my original comp. I saw Maxwell Roy as an underclassman at the Under Armour camp in New Jersey, and I also saw him play last fall, as I talked about earlier, when I went to see St. Joe Prep against IMG Academy, and what was a great defensive struggle of a game, which was awesome to see Roy play in. And when I went out to that game specifically is when I initially made that Chris Jenkins comp. the reason I think that's kind of been forgotten about is just Maxwell Roy doesn't do any interviews hardly. You know, he'll do some here and there. When I have talked to him, he's been a great kid, but he's mostly really, really quiet, not super social media friendly either. If you go to like his Twitter, like he's made like 2 posts in the last 4 months or something. So I just don't think a lot of people are familiar with him because he's not all over the place doing interviews and posting on social media and things of that nature. But if you watch his film, you can definitely see the Chris Jenkins comp. It definitely stands out right away. Like I mentioned earlier, just this similar frame, similar athleticism, and yeah, similar versatility. I think he's best suited to be a 4-eye, but he can also play the 3. He can play the nose in a pinch as well. Could even stand up if you really needed him to. There's a lot to like about Maxwell Roy. And like I said at the top, I do think he's a top 250 prospect, unlike On3, which has him as a 3-star. The other services have him in that range as well. John A. Schultz says, EJR Brooks Barr from the 2023 class, Ted Hammond from the 24 class, Bobby Kanka from the 25 class, all the same person. Which version of this person rated highest in your evals? They are the same person. Zach and I always laugh about this. Zach was pretty close to Ted Hammond, and he is close to Bobby Kanka. And I'm like, man, Mike Elston definitely had a certain type of recruit that he looked for. Guys that were just really strong, had some decent length, and just brought their hard hats to work every day. Not necessarily the most athletic prospects or exciting prospects, but just really, you know, they brought their lunch pails, whatever you want to, you know, say that's overused for these types of prospects. But you know, as far as who I had graded the highest, I had them, you know, all in the same range. I think they were all 3 stars for me. I think Brooks Barr was probably the lowest. Bobby Kanka in the middle, and Ted Hammond the highest. I thought Ted Hammond had more athletic upside than the other 2. This is going to be a weird reference, but Ted Hammond was one of the best swimmers in the state of Ohio. And I don't know exactly how swimming translates, but you have to be pretty athletic to be one of the more elite swimmers. So yeah, I think Ted Hammond is probably the best of the 3, but I would say I had them all in the 3-star range, with Ted probably being in the high 3s. John A. Schultz says, EJ, you've said Carter Smith is elite when it comes to his running ability as a quarterback. Which past college quarterback does his running ability remind you of? So when you're a recruiting reporter like me, you get kind of obsessed with finding player comparisons, and you start watching like old films and stuff. At first I said that Carter kind of reminded me of Taysom Hill, who Jim Harbaugh actually recruited when Taysom Hill was a recruit. And he does kind of have that similar running ability, but when you look at Carter, the build is not the same. Carter's a little more stretched out, a little taller than Taysom, a little more, you know, a little skinnier than Taysom, just a different type of build, right? So, you know, he can have Taysom Hill level like production. But the more I looked back at old film, the guy that stood out to me when I was watching like highlights and stuff of past NFL guys was Cordell Stewart. Like Cordell Stewart was one of my favorite players to play with on NFL Blitz. But he was also one of the most dynamic running quarterbacks in the NFL in that particular era. I only remember him slightly from my childhood, but going back and watching some of his clips at Colorado and with the Steelers, that's the type of runner that Carter is. And Cordell had a hell of an arm too. He could just fling that thing down to the field and didn't have necessarily the all-world mechanics, and neither does Carter. But man, Carter throws in the 90s on the baseball diamond, and he does have that type of arm where he can just throw it over the moon. And the running ability is certainly there. And, you know, obviously Cordell's nickname was Slash. And, you know, while Carter doesn't play other positions. He kind of is a running back in his high school's offense. They run him a lot. The whole offense goes through him. And if you really needed him to play wide receiver, I think Carter would be a great wide receiver. If you needed him to play safety, I think Carter would be a great safety as well. And he's just an athlete, man. When you think about, or when you look at Carter's background, not only did he have a great baseball background as well, his dad actually showed me some clips of him boxing as a kid. And just, that's why I'm not too concerned about his footwork. Obviously, you have to have great feet in boxing, and seeing him box and move around, I'm like, he'll pick this up pretty easily. So yeah, I mean, I would say Cordell Stewart would be my Carter comparison. Like, I really think he's that special of a runner. Ava Devidanaj says Douglas Utu, Nebraska is the favorite on the RPM now, 26 Nebraska and 23% Michigan. Guys, you have to understand that the recruiting prediction machine is largely based on visits. So anytime a visit is put in, like Douglas Utu just set a midweek visit to Nebraska. So I believe he's on campus right now. That pushed Nebraska into the lead on the RPM. So that had nothing to do with Utu's comments about Michigan or anything like that. The RPM is an AI thing that just, it uses visits and social media. And you can look up how it works. I actually don't really know, but I know visits really factor into the movement. So anytime, you put in a visit for, like, if I were to put in a visit for Douglas Utu to, I don't know, I'll think of a random school, West Virginia. If I were to put in a Douglas Utu West Virginia prediction, or not a prediction, just a visit, it would bump them up like close to where Alabama is. Like, it would give them a certain percentage chance just based off the visit. So I wouldn't put too much stock into the RPM until somebody actually makes a prediction to a school. Nate the Great says, hey, EJ, what are your early impressions of Lou Esposito? Maran Dy's recruitment was dead in the water for Michigan until now, plus he's landed Nate Marshall. Seems like a great hire. Yeah, I don't think anybody had these super high expectations for Esposito. Given his background, I mentioned earlier, he's not a guy that had a lot of P4 recruiting experience. He was a guy that, some experts called an underwhelming hire. But he's been fantastic, man. He's absolutely killed it on the recruiting trail. And, for those people that called him an underwhelming hire, you look at his track record as an actual coach and, from the G5 level, he put guys in the league. So I think Esposito has done a phenomenal job of developing guys in the past. So I think he'll do great as an on-the-field coach. And as a recruiter, he's proved to be ultra aggressive and have a magnetic, exciting personality that has really resonated well with recruits and parents. And you're starting to see some results, actual results. Nate Marshall committing, Maxwell Roy on the verge, Jaylen Williams on the verge, back in the mix here with Maran Dy, squarely in the mix with Marco Jones, improving the stock with DJ Sanders, who, normally I would have just said there's no way a small town Texas kid is going to Michigan. And here we go. DJ Sanders' mother gave me a lot of great comments on Michigan, which you can find at thewolverine.com. So I think he's doing an A+ job. That's what I would give Lou, an A+. So before we move on to our next question, guys, we do have a message from our sponsor, and that is ourselves. The Wolverine.com also has a magazine. We are about to release the Football Preview magazine, which is a must get for all Michigan fans. It features defensive back Will Johnson on the cover. It delivers everything you need to know about Michigan football for the 2024 season. Included in this information-packed 160-page magazine are a season preview breaking down the Wolverines' best players and position groups, the freshmen most likely to play, a detailed position-by-position look at the Wolverines with player bios, player and coach interviews, historical articles, updates on Wolverines in the NFL, a final evaluation of the departing recruiting class, a roundtable with national college football experts giving their thoughts on Michigan, note sections, a Big Ten preview, expert columns, opponent previews, and so much more. So basically everything you can find or want to know about Michigan football, you can find in the football preview. Now head over to the WolverineOnDemand.com. Pre-order your football preview now. The issue mails in July, and it's June 5th, so you can save $5 with free shipping on pre-orders before June 17th. So order your preview now. There's there's all these national college football magazines, Athlon, Lindy's, and publications like that. But if you want Michigan focused, super in-depth, 160 pages, there's no better magazine than the Wolverine magazine and the 2024 Michigan football preview. All right, let's get back to recruiting. We'll try to speed along here since we're over time a bit. Nate the Great says, how are we feeling about Jordan Davison since Bo Jackson went to Ohio State? I'd have to imagine Michigan will try to hammer it home that he's a running back one on the OV. Yeah, Michigan is going to sell that he's a top priority, where, Ohio State has Bo Jackson. They are leading for Isaiah West as well. So, I don't have a lot of optimism here because Ohio State would take all three of those running backs, but I do think it opens the door for that pitch that he is the guy in a run-heavy offense, if he were to end up at Michigan. But I think NIL could be a factor here. And, even if Ohio State misses, I would still be very concerned about Oregon. So, I think Michigan's in better shape with a couple of other running backs. Nate the Great says, thoughts on Shakai Mills Knight? He seems like the second best option if Michigan misses on Davison. The second best option is actually Todd Robinson, who's coming in for his official visit on June 21st. But Shakai Mills Knight is a great player as well. He's kind of a hidden gem just because he played his ball in Canada and then ended up coming to the United States this past year. So just flown under the radar, limited football experience as well, kind of new to the game. But he's a battering ram at 6'2", 210 pounds. He has some really impressive film. I think he's going to shoot up the rankings, much like Todd Robinson, who I mentioned earlier. Now, Shakai Mills Knight was on campus for a visit this week. He just left not too long ago. With Shakai Mills Knight, I think it's important to note that visit was actually an unofficial visit. I know I reported it as an OV, but that was my bad. I got it clarified today. It was an unofficial visit. And it looks like Mills Knight is looking to return for an OV, which would be absolutely big, potentially later in the summer. Or, I talked to one of the people around him, and the Texas-Michigan game is a possibility if he decides a little bit later in the process. But I think Michigan put themselves in the running for sure. Several other, schools really involved here: Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss. He's actually on his way to Alabama right now. So tough recruitment to win, but Michigan definitely gave itself a shot. And, if they get him back for an OV, I think that would be fantastic. Nate the Great says, who's your favorite Michigan target you covered in the 25 cycle so far? So definitely Carter. I think everybody knows how much I like Carter. Just not only his game is extremely fun to watch, but just the type of kid he is. It's great covering a quarterback again that has a similar personality to JJ. So yeah, I really like Carter on offense and on defense. Like I said earlier, big fan of Jaylen Williams. John A. Schultz says, EJ, how confident are you that Michigan will get Taz Williams in the class? Which other wide receivers are most likely to end up in the class? I feel like Ohio State is making Porter a priority and he'll end up in Columbus. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Porter ends up there. Michigan has the lead on the on-three recruiting prediction machine for Taz Williams, but I think he's really wrestling with potentially staying closer to home. SMU and Texas A&M also have a lot of reason to feel optimistic about their chances. So I don't have a good read right now as far as, making a prediction or anything like that. I think Michigan still has some momentum. I think it's great that they get him last for Victor's weekend, but I definitely don't think it's a guarantee, but I do think they are still right there heading into his July decision. So Taz is certainly a possibility. If we're talking about bigger receivers, if they miss on Quincy and Derek Meadows, then Jacob Washington out of Louisiana is a possibility. If you're talking about slot guys like Taz Williams, if they miss out on Taz, they could end up with a guy like Sean Terry, who just recently decommitted from Notre Dame. And there's a few other, slot prospects as well. Preston Bowman out of Ohio, who's kind of under the radar, could end up at Michigan. So, it's just tough for Ron Bellamy. I kind of feel for him just because Michigan doesn't have a super pass heavy offense, and the NIL, isn't up to par either when it comes to skill positions that are elite. So, it's tough sledding landing a high level wide receiver at Michigan, but I think Bellamy will give it his best go. EJ, are you going to be looking after farm animals in Texas again this year? Hopefully not, but I will be going down to visit family at some point. So when I talked to DJ Sanders' mom earlier today, I told her I'd go down to see DJ whenever I go back home. And obviously I'll see Taz, if he picks Michigan, but probably won't be down there until, 2-a-day start. So probably early August. K6R says, when is Tony Alford going to land a running back? Guys, he's been here for like a few months, man. When is Brian G. Mary going to land a linebacker? When is Lamar Morgan going to land a DB? Like, these guys have been here for a few months. Give them a break. Like, they started late in the game this cycle. And so, there's been so much transition at Michigan. So Lou Esposito is just, the kind of anomaly when it comes to that. But these new staff members have to make up ground. They had to reset their boards and things of that nature, just deal with the overall movement of the program. So I think that all these guys deserve a little bit of a break. But I think Tony Alford's really positioned Michigan well for a lot of the elites in 2026. And he has Michigan in the mix with, some good running backs this cycle, from Jordan Davison to Shakai Mills Knight to Todd Robinson to Jasper Parker. I think they'll end up with one of them by the end of summer. Borge Warner says, will we get Boateng? So talking about Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. I think that Michigan is definitely in the top group for him. He's also one of my favorite prospects. I got a chance to meet Wu when he was an underclassman at DeMatha here in the DMV, and he was just a great kid to talk to. I think he really values academics and the off the field advantages that Michigan can provide. But at the same time, I think Michigan's still playing a little bit from behind here. Notre Dame is in a good spot. His brother actually played there. Ohio State has built some recent momentum. He was just at USC. Florida has the lead on the on-through recruiting prediction machine. So, and I think this is a pretty tight race. I would probably put, if I had to say where Michigan is right now, I'd probably say like third or something like that. But they obviously have a chance to move up on his OV. George Warner also says, how confident are you on us getting Kainoa Winston? I would say right now it's 51-49 Michigan going into the Penn State OV. I think it's so close. It really could go either way depending on how the official visit to Penn State goes. I think Michigan did a fantastic job on the official visit. I think they checked every single box for Kainoa Winston. Michigan did exactly what it needed to do with both Winston and his family. With Penn State, he's comfortable there. He's been to Penn State more than he has Michigan. His cousin KJ is a star for the Nittany Lions, so that plays a role as well. So it'll be interesting to see, how it shakes out over the next several days. But, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in Michigan. I would give them a very tiny advantage coming out of the OV weekend. But, still that Penn State visit still looms large. Thoughts on DJ Sanders? Like I said, I had a great conversation with his mother. You can read the story over at thewolverine.com. DJ's already talking about coming back for another visit in July, maybe for the barbecue at the big house. Since he's from Texas, hopefully they avoid those hot dogs. But overall, I think Michigan's in a great spot, a much better spot than I thought they would be. I don't think it's an automatic lock that he ends up at Texas A&M like the RPM basically says. I think the family's more open to going further away from home. His uncle actually lives in the state of Michigan, so I think that the Wolverines definitely helped themselves over the weekend, and he would be an absolutely, massive land. You're talking about a kid that's 6'4", 325 pounds with a 6'11" wingspan. Kind of reminds me of Kenneth Grant. Would be, again, absolutely fantastic. K6R says, how are we looking with Shamari Earls and Blake Woodby? I talked about Earls earlier. They just have to get him to campus. Blake Woodby trending to Auburn, so not much of a chance there. Borge Warner says, is Hardy Watts coming? So Hardy Watts, on 300 offensive lineman out of New England. Pretty close to putting in an on-3 prediction there. I think the Clemson visit went well, so that's the one that has me a little bit worried. But I think Michigan can knock it out of the park when he officially visits for Victor's weekend. And if they do, I could very well see him in the class. I wouldn't be surprised if he's one I put in a pick for at some point in the near future. Henry Kardorski says, EJ, anything new on Terrion Grant? We've seen some buzz like a month ago, nothing more than since then. Is he sticking with Purdue? Yes, he actually already enrolled at Purdue and reclassified. K6R says, is Jordan Davison going to OSU with Bo Jackson committing? Like I said earlier, it's a possibility. Ohio State is open to taking 3 running backs this cycle. John H. Schultz says, EJ, Brady Hart or Brady Smeagol? My precious. Who do you like better, and who is Michigan in better shape to land? I only recently watched Lord of the Rings, by the way. My wife made me – I was always more of a Harry Potter guy. My wife made me watch all of the Lord of the Rings like in a week, which was kind of painful because you had to divide it up into like 10 days. But I'm still more Harry Potter. But anyway, I would go Brady Hart slightly. I think that both of them are very high-level quarterbacks. With Brady Smeagol, he's a coach's son. The Newbury Park offense is very system-friendly. He can make all the throws. He's very accurate. He's he has great prototypical quarterback size, great IQ of the game. I think with Brady Hart, he's also another pocket passer that offers a little bit more athleticism. He's a guy that can certainly zip the ball as well. And I think there's still more upside there. I still think there's a little bit more untapped potential with Brady Hart. His dad played in the majors, so he was more of a baseball background, kind of like Carter Smith. You see Notre Dame has the heavy lead on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine, but they just picked up a quarterback commit from Noah Grubbs. So I think that Michigan's in a prime opportunity to take advantage here. He's visiting this month, and Smeagol's visiting this month. I think if you were to ask me who are the top guys on Michigan's quarterback board in 2026, I would say Brady Hart and Brady Smeagol, and I think Michigan would be over the moon if they land one of those guys. David Mabadi says, hey EJ, what's happening with the VA guys, Deloach and Delhomme? Didn't Lamar Morgan go out to see them? Yeah, Lamar did come out to see them in May. I don't think they're going to make a move with Messiah Delhomme, and I think they're still kind of iffy with Jamari Deloach. Deloach is more of a pure nickel. He's obviously, trending heavily to Michigan, but that was with the previous staff. So I think they're just exploring some more options. I'm told that, Michigan values guys that can play more than one position in the secondary. And so that's kind of been a little bit of a holdup with Jamari Deloach. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring him in for an OB or not. David Mabadi says, who are some guys that are on Michigan's board or commits who you expect to rise or fall in the rankings as seniors? I talked about, the running back, Shakai Mills Knight and Todd Robinson are two of the more underrated prospects in the country. I think both will end up in the on 300. I think both could end up in the top 200, top 150. Like, those guys have unlimited potential. I think they're truly elite backs. I think some people have given Tony Alford a little bit of crap for recruiting 3-stars. These guys aren't 3-stars. Like Mills Knight and Todd Robinson are absolutely going to balloon in the rankings. As far as some guys that could drop, I think Bobby Kanka is rated as a 4-star. Michigan's defensive line commit, I could easily see him dropping to a 3-star. I have him as a 3-star. Nate Marshall could drop. I don't have him graded as high as the services, which I've said, and I'm sure you guys will give me crap for it. But, I think he's a little bit of a tweener. I'm not exactly sure where he fits in to this defense. I think he'll eventually play with his hand in the dirt as opposed to a stand-up guy. But, I'm still high on Nate Marshall. This is going to be like another Jaden Davis situation, but I'm still high on Nate Marshall. I would have him kind of in that top 100 to 150 range right now, but I don't have him in the top 100 area. But those are some guys that I think could rise and drop that just kind of come to mind. Philly Domside Dude 0007 says, EJ, what's your bench press numbers looking like? I mean, I haven't benched since I was in high school. When I was in high school, I weighed 210 pounds and my bench was like 275. So was not doing many reps of 225. Now I weigh like 175 pounds. So I don't think I can still lift that. Newbird says, who are this weekend's most exciting visitors? The most exciting visitors, for me, the most exciting visitor period is probably Maran Dy, just because he's so highly touted by On3. They have him ranked as a top 50 prospect. He looks the part on film, and his storyline's just so intriguing because Michigan wasn't a factor at all, and now they're obviously in the mix. So, yeah, I think Maran Dy is a super exciting visitor, just, again, based on potential and the fact that this could turn into an Ohio State-Michigan battle and that Lou Esposito got the Wolverines back in the mix. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of storylines with Maran Dy. And I mean, the other guys I think we're just kind of more familiar with. Jordan Davison, I don't think a lot of people are too excited about just because he's trending to Ohio State. SJ Alafatuli, more of an interior offensive lineman. Jaylen Williams, guys are kind of familiar with already. Julius Hawley. Let's talk about Julius Hawley, man, because nobody's talking about Julius Hawley. So obviously, Maran Dy is a top target. Michigan's close to potentially landing Jaylen Williams, but Julius Hawley is a guy that's high on the board as well. He's right up there with Marco Jones and Maran Dy as a pass rusher that Lou Esposito is prioritizing. So, Hawley's kind of been a little bit of a late riser, 6'5", 220 out of Georgia. And you see those schools that are on the RPM, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. It's scary to think about these SEC schools, but Georgia is still doing further evaluation on him, so it's not a guarantee that they are going to make a hard push for him. And Hawley is a high academic kid. He is a guy that was once considered a Stanford lean. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're back next week and we're talking about how Michigan made this huge move for Julius Hawley. I think, out of all the visitors, he's the least talked about, and he should be a guy that should definitely be on your radar. When I actually did the mock class a few weeks ago, I had him in there. So I think that Michigan is being undervalued in the Hawley recruitment. Let's go down to Henry Kardorsky, and he says, EJ, would Michigan be fine with only Eli Owens as tight end for the class? It seems Olesh is the only target Michigan is fighting for right now, and you said Owens is more of an H-back. Good question. No, they would take another tight end. Andrew Olesh, they are all in on. That's the guy they want. If Michigan is unable to close with Andrew Olesh this summer, they will revisit some other options. Steve Casula was in Oklahoma, seeing Dakota Terrell. So I think he would be pretty much next up on the board. And there are a few other guys that Casula saw during the spring evaluation period as well. But right now the focus is on landing Andrew Olesh. But I think two for sure. They want a guy that's more of Colston Loveland type in terms that is a guy you can flex out and also be a traditional tight end where, Eli Owens is kind of that H-back. Third base investigators Says, who are the undervalued recruits like Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Colston Loveland? We talked about a few earlier. Maxwell Roy obviously comes to mind as a guy that's underrated by On3. I have him graded really high. Jaylen Williams is a prospect that I have graded, higher than a lot of the services as well. Those two prospects are ones that, really come to mind for me. If you are looking for, guys in the secondary that fit the bill, one kid that I really like is Trinity Watley out of Georgia. Michigan just offered him. He's a 3-star recruit. He's ranked like the 800s or something like that. He has 1 year of football playing experience. He's one of the best track athletes in the state of Georgia and has only been focused on track prior to playing football this past year. He also happens to be 6'3", 180. So if you're looking for a steal on the back end, Trinity Watley is one to really watch. Like I said, Michigan just offered like last week. They are trying to get him on campus, so he's one to definitely keep an eye on. Another one on the back end that I was really impressed with from an athletic profile standpoint is Brandon Finney out of the DMV. He had some of the best testing numbers at the Under Armour camp in Baltimore. I thought he moved really, really well for his size. Michigan is trying to get him up for an official visit, and if they do, I think they could be definitely in the mix with him. So, Brandon Finney is another kind of taller, longer corner with plus athleticism. Dutchman says, EJ, best recruiting analyst we got, but how will revenue sharing affect recruiting? I'm not sure. It's kind of an unknown right now. I think maybe it'll help a school like Michigan that isn't really doing pay for play for high school recruits. But I do feel like right now it's kind of just a wait and see, and we'll have a better understanding whenever that does come into fruition. K6R says, considering how we run the ball, why doesn't Michigan get the top running backs? Well, Mike Hart didn't really go after the top running backs per se. Outside of, Jordan Marshall, he was content settling on guys. I think Tony Alford's more in tune with trying to shoot for the stars and getting elite backs. I mean, Michigan should be a running back destination school. Obviously, NIL hinders Michigan's ability to land some of those big fish, but I think you'll see Tony Alford really get in his groove next cycle. Henry Kardowski says, EJ, do you think that the quarterback from Belleville said about Michigan holds any truth, or is this just free slander for him? So I think Bryce Underwood said something along the lines of LSU having more quarterback production. Obviously Michigan did a great job of developing JJ McCarthy. It's not the most pass-friendly offense when you look at LSU. They've obviously been able to sling the ball around. So I think there's some truth to what he says, but at the same time, I still think it was more NIL related. Ava Dedavanaj, and also just to go back on that, not only was it NIL related, but I also think Bryce always had a wandering eye for the SEC and just wanted to get away from home too. But Ava Dedavanaj says, anyway, we get David Sanders back on campus. No. Jadon Blair update. That was quick. Our producer had to take him off the screen. Jadon Blair update. Notre Dame's gotten the buzz recently with the prediction, but Steve Wilfong came on our board, said Michigan still has a viable chance there, and I agree. I still think Michigan is right up there and could make a major move on his official visit, especially since Michigan gets him in after Notre Dame. K6R, how are we looking for the Bishop Gorman kids? Michigan's in a good spot with all of them. I think right now they're in the best spot with Douglas Utu coming out of his OV, but those guys are taking a lot of visits, so I think we'll just have to see how it plays out the next few weeks. Keegan Imhoff says, will we see record amounts of flipping this year with the revenue sharing passing? It really just depends when it goes into effect and there's a clear-cut plan. I'm not sure it'll have much of an effect, for this cycle, since most guys commit in the summer. But I guess you're asking about flips. I really don't know. I mean, it's really just a big unknown. Our Butter XO says, are we looking good on D-line targets? Yes, we've covered that extensively. I think Lou Esposito has Michigan in a great spot for Jaylen Williams, and Maxwell Roy already has Nate Marshall committed, and obviously had Marco Jones on campus, Maran Dy on campus, Julius Hawley on campus, or Dy and Hawley coming in this weekend. So yeah, I think that doing great with D-line recruiting right now. Richard Holcomb says, will Michigan get a 5-star anytime soon? It's tough in the NIL era. I wouldn't say they get a 5-star this cycle, unless they're able to pull like Quincy Porter or Derek Meadows. Those guys could finish as 5 stars, but yeah, just probably unlikely. Justin Stram says, EJ, how do you think the recruiting staff additions will help recruiting? Also, is there any new news on Michigan getting some NIL recruiting for the high 4 stars and 5 stars that they want? No real movement with the NIL side. Michigan's been using the same pitch on these official visits. So we'll see if anything changes with either A, the revenue sharing, or, B, if the collectives and the athletic department and the coaching staff and everybody just gets on the same page about how to attack this. As I've said before, I don't think there's any reason Michigan shouldn't be able to do what Notre Dame does. In terms of the recruiting staff additions, a lot of those guys, don't have a lot of Power 4 experience or much experience at all. I want to say more than half of the hires had internship experience as opposed to actual working experience. So I think these guys will just help with contact, helping the coaches with their boards, maintaining contact with secondary and tertiary targets, getting camp invites out, chopping up film, mailing letters, doing a lot of the grunt work that, the coaching staff obviously doesn't have time for. So, yeah, I think they'll help with more of a organization standpoint as opposed to real connections. I think Michigan is up to par in terms of numbers in the recruiting department. Now there's just experience to be had, right? Like all of the guys that Michigan has in the recruiting department right now have limited P4 experience. So I think they just need to make some, they need to find a guy like a Courtney Morgan that just has a vast network that's able to help the coaching staff with the relationship building and things of that nature. And Courtney was also great at identifying talent. He was very responsible for Mason Graham and some others. So, finding a guy like that to put at the top would definitely help. K6R says, is DJ Pickett interested in Michigan still? No. Struggle streaming with BK. I'm a little late to the show tonight, so apologize if someone already asked, but are we getting Taz Williams since he locked in his commitment date? We talked a little bit about it earlier, but, I don't think he's a lock, but I think Michigan is definitely right up there, and we'll know more after his official visit. I think he's kind of wrestling with the idea of staying closer to home with SMU and Texas A&M, both having reason to feel all optimistic as well. Dutchman says, what is the worst case scenario in terms of number of recruits? And Michigan will fill out the class either way, whether it's late additions or something else. But, they'll find a way to get around 20 to 25 guys. I don't think numbers will be an issue. And last question comes from Joseph Grimaldi. So long show tonight. What true offensive tackles are Michigan in good shape for? True offensive tackles, that's a tough one with Babalola now trending towards Stanford. Michael Carroll's kind of a flex guy. Hardy Watts is kind of a flex guy. The Gorman guys are more interior offensive linemen. So I think, true tackle, there isn't really one guy that I can point to and say Michigan's in a great spot with this true tackle. That's what makes missing out on Will Black early in the cycle to Notre Dame a real gut punch. Like, he would have been the true elite tackle. That was the biggest miss of the cycle. I hate to end it on that note. Oh, we do have some more questions. Okay, great. Let's not end it on a Notre Dame note. EJ, why doesn't Michigan put you on the payroll every cycle that recruits you choose as the guys to look out for always hit bigs? You'd make an awesome recruiting evaluator. I'd never want to work in a college department. I really enjoy getting on the road and interacting with recruits and doing my role as a reporter. I went to school to be a reporter. So, the evaluation thing has been cool. It's something I've picked up being in the business for so long. But I really have no interest in working in an actual recruiting department. And last question says, what do you think about Lamar Brown to Michigan, Ava Dedavinaj? So Lamar Brown, 5-star in the 2026 class. He is out of Louisiana, and I do not think Michigan's going to have a realistic shot there. They might get him to campus or something, but it's going to be tough sledding pulling a 5-star from Louisiana in the NIL era. So last question, I guess we had one more sneak in here. Richard Holcomb says, what is it like to make a visit to Michigan? What makes it great? I would say the things that make Michigan's visit a little bit unique is just the culture and family atmosphere. That's something that, recruits and parents always mention as feeling different from some of the other schools. I think that, it's just a different vibe at Michigan, and they really get that feel from the coaching staff and their players. The coaching staff always brings their families around. The players are super interactive. The player hosts have done a great job so far. Everybody from Rayshon Benny to Zeke Berry to Blake Frazier, Amarion Stewart, they've done a great job of finding players that connect well with the recruits. The nutrition program is different. Everybody always praises Abigail O'Connor, and she's done a fantastic job. And just the off the field focus, I guess, on the internships and what Michigan can offer for life after football is something they really hone in on. And I think they just do a good job of breaking down film with the recruits and showing them exact fits, giving them Michigan player comps, like for Kainoa Winston. They put his film by Mike Sainristil and said this is why he'd be a perfect fit for the nickel. So they do a great job in that aspect as well. All right, guys, that is it. I appreciate you guys for joining me tonight. For more Michigan recruiting information, head over to thewolverine.com. And make sure to like this video and subscribe for free. But if you head over to thewolverine.com, you can find premium information using the promo code UM1. That gets you $1 for 2 months. So if you want the inside scoop on everything Michigan recruiting, head over to thewolverine.com. Use the promo code UM1.